In this video, I'm going to show you where to start with hip flexor tightness. This is video 2 in a series of 100 videos where I'm looking at the most common questions that I'm asked. We'll look at where to start with tightness, some of the reasons why you might not be getting gains that you would expect, some things where people are going wrong, and some things that you should be doing. So first thing to think about is, why are your hip flexors tight? Could be things like arthritis, FAI syndrome. We see a relationship between low back pain and hip flexor tightness, but sometimes it's hard to know which one came first. The same with a reduced stride length. We do see a relationship between nerve tension and muscles guarding that tension, causing tightness. Sitting for long periods of time, something we always thought, but is now proven by research. Could be weakness, could be trying to access ranges in sport-specific positions that you don't necessarily have or own. So what you do about that may be dependent on the actual cause of the problem. What I'm going to show in this video might not be the only thing you do, but it might make up part of a broader treatment plan. Now, the first thing we need to think about is, what are hip flexors and how we're going to address them? Now, usually when we're addressing tightness, we're looking at stretching. In some cases, this might not be what you want to do because we need to get some strength into some weak hip flexors. We also see stretching where people aren't addressing the regions that they need to stretch. And this is probably the most common problem that we see when we're addressing hip flexor tightness. So if you're looking at videos or pictures where you're seeing people in these long lunges, they're probably not addressing the area of the hip flexors that they need. Hip flexors are lots of different muscles that flex the hip. Obviously, it's not just a muscle or a group of muscles. It is dependent on whether we're flexing, moving the trunk, or we're moving the leg. It's also dependent on where those two things started from and how much we have frontal or rotational plane movement involved. So to keep it simple, people are usually talking about things like iliopsoas and rectus femoris, one of the quad muscles. I think that's what we will talk about here, but just know that there's more involved. Now, often what we see when we're looking at stretching the rec fem is we're seeing something like, for example, maybe standing and pulling your heel towards your butt. If we're going to do this, we're just going to get the muscle at the knee end. Now, rec fem is a biarticular muscle. It crosses both the hip and the knee. So we can target the area that we want to get tension, load, stretch in, depending on what we're going to move. And in most cases, when we're looking at hip flexor tightness, obviously we should be looking at what's happening at the hip. In order to do that, if we just have a look on Boner here, we would want to move this up, okay? So we'd want to keep the knee anchored and we're going to pull away, so we're creating tension in this direction. In order to do that, we could just lean back. So let's say we were in a kneeling lunge, we might just lean back, or something I often talk about is pointing your belly button up. Ideally, we're looking to posteriorly tilt the hip here. This is the most important thing when we're looking to stretch this muscle, and it's the most missed thing in terms of not making any gains. One of the other reasons we're not seeing gains is a lack of intensity. So all the research looking at stretching, some of the reasons why we don't see gains as we would expect is often lack of intensity. Ways that we can improve intensity are obviously coming deeper into a stretch so we're getting more sensation, but even better is adding isometrics. It's a big part of the Stretch Yourself Strong system. The bonus being that we're also getting strength through our range of motion and into these muscles when we add isometrics. Isometrics being a contraction where we're not moving. So a way you could do an isometric contraction is something like a kneeling lunge, would be to either push the foot down of the leg that's being stretched, or to lean back, or maybe even hold a weight. And I'm going to add some videos so that I can show you examples of this. I'll give you some ways to get that in a minute. But we really want to be adding intensity. The other thing we do, and is fairly unique to the Stretch Yourself Strong system, is ensuring that we're moving in 3 planes of motion. Muscles don't just move in a straight line. We want to make sure we're addressing all these lines of tension that the muscles respond to. So it's difficult to see here really, but we'd be looking at lifting the hip in this direction. So hiking the hip, it could be as simple as leaning over, would be a frontal plane load, and also twisting the trunk away from the knee. Again, I'll put this into some videos so you can see it. So really where you want to start is first understanding where that tension comes from. Not always an easy task, but we really want to make sure that we're getting load into the hip. We want to be adding some more tension, intensity, and strength through isometrics. Then what we would do in the Stretch Yourself Strong system is we would add eccentric loading. We want to get muscle change. But more importantly, if it's a sport-specific problem for you, if you're constantly pulling up tight because you're trying to access ranges that you don't have, we would look at improving our range in those movements, but would actually make sure we can access those ranges explosively. Flexibility is different under different conditions. Just because we can do a stretch and we now go, oh, our quads, rec fem or whatever, seem to be more flexible, it's going to be different depending on how much load we add to it and how quickly we try and access that range. So we need to train all of those sorts of things. That's what we'll do through the 4 phases of the Stretch Yourself Strong system, information on websites and things like that. Now, in terms of examples of these, I will add some videos on YouTube's, on socials. This is also part of a newsletter I'm sending out each week. So if you want everything in one spot, I'll put a link in the comments and you can join us each week for this series of 100 questions. If you have your own question, please make sure you send that to me. I will add it to the list. Otherwise, I will see you in the next one.